Hi, I'm Dr. John Douillard, and I wrote an article recently called Are We Seasonal Breeders? This is all linked to our understanding of the circadian clock. And are we so far out of whack that we don't breed like any other mammal on the planet? I mean, studies have shown that mammals, they have to breed at a certain time in the fall to have their babies at a certain time early spring to be able to have the baby big enough and strong enough to weather the winter. And there's a very, very tight window for mammals to make this happen in. And humans, we just don't do that anymore. It is clear that studies show that most babies are born in the spring, even to this day. But there's some interesting science that I want to share with you, and I share with you in this article called Are We Seasonal Breeders on my website at LifeSpa.com. And to make us sort of understand that maybe we are a little bit more out of whack than we should. I mean, circadian medicine won the Nobel Prize. It's a really big deal to be in sync with the natural rhythms. And one of those rhythms are the light-dark cycles, which is regulated by a molecule, a 3 billion-year-old molecule called melatonin. And melatonin is a molecule that helps keep our biological clocks connected to the rhythms of nature. So our digestion turns on at the right time, our sleep hormones turn on at the right time, our detox turns on at the right time. Everything is in natural and rhythm. Ayurveda was all about the rhythms. I mean, Ayurveda 101, the whole course we did with Yoga Journal was all about yoga, breathing, meditation with every season, because all of those rhythms support different requirements for yoga and breathing and meditation. So it's, once again in Ayurveda, the more subtle the thing is, the more powerful. And now we have more and more science saying, they're right. Those rhythms, those daily rhythms, the circadian rhythms make the birds fly south and the whales migrate that we could never feel or touch or taste. Turns out to be Nobel Prize winning science. It's a real thing that we are disconnected from. So in the winter time, what happens is the melatonin levels during the nighttime will surge during the dark times of the year. And during the spring, the melatonin levels are suppressed. And Russ Ryder, who wrote the book on melatonin, still a PhD researcher doing research on melatonin still to this day, even in his 80s, discussed the relationship between reproductive hormone and reproductive strength during different seasons. And it turns out that in the wintertime, that the melatonin is increased to such an extent that it suppresses reproductive function. When they went to, in the 1890s, when they first discovered or researched some of the Eskimo tribes and civilizations, they realized that during the wintertime, many of the women's menstrual cycle would just completely stop. They were not reproductively active to have babies at that time, because if they did have a baby in the middle of the winter, that would set the baby born way too late, and then it would be then a really young infant with the next winter coming, which would be really bad for species survival. So it's all about, even for us, species survival. One study showed that hamsters during the wintertime, they measured their testicles and they would swell to massively large levels in the wintertime, and then in the springtime they would shrink right back down, and they linked that ebb and flow of these testicles to melatonin, to the molecule that regulates light-dark cycles, and they related that change of testicular melatonin, the ebb and flow of the size of the testicles, to having like an 8-pound testicle for a man, suggesting only that these rhythms in nature are really, really powerful. In one study in northern Finland, there was a period of 8-week period during the winter, the dark winter months, where conception rates dramatically decreased and declined. So we have this sort of understanding that the rhythms of nature are very, very powerful, and that melatonin is regulating the reproductive function of our body. And they suggested that, before electricity, which is recent, before even fire, which is obviously not recent, there was a period of time where when the light went out and the sun went down, it was over. There was nothing really to do. Lighting a fire, even a fire, was orange light. It doesn't have blue light in it, so it doesn't block the melatonin production. It doesn't activate or inhibit the suprachiasmatic nuclei from sending signals to release melatonin. So you can actually still produce that. But even before fire, it was just dark. So you go to bed at 5 o'clock at night when the sun would go down. You're in melatonin heaven all the way till sunrise, which can be 13, 14, 15, 16 hours a day, depending on where you live in the wintertime, right? That's a lot of melatonin. Nowadays, we don't have that. We are up and watching TV until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. That's 6 hours of melatonin we don't get, that we once did get, which is really important. And what happens is melatonin, everybody thinks melatonin is a sleep hormone. Well, first of all, it's not even a hormone because it doesn't suppress the natural production of your own. It actually encourages the natural production of your own, which makes it not a hormone. It's a molecule that's in every living creature because every living creature needs to know whether it's connected or not connected to the light-dark cycles, right? I did a podcast with a melatonin researcher from Duquesne University. Her name was Paula Witt. And she did research, personally did research, and there's tons of studies online for melatonin. And you don't see the research you don't hear about it very much because you can buy it in the grocery store. And the problem with that is that Western medicine wants nothing to do with the volumes of research on melatonin that exists. And she did research showing that melatonin literally reversed breast cancer and osteoporosis, powerfully protects you from prostate cancer, and a host of other amazing things, including for the reproductive sense. When you have low melatonin, you're more vulnerable to anxiety, depression, headaches, PMS, weight gain, cravings, poor sleep, all these issues. I don't use melatonin for a sleep aid. I use it as a circadian reset that we need when we get older because we don't make as much melatonin to hack the aging process. I use it at higher doses sometimes to bring the body into balance, but I love mostly using what's called low-dose melatonin. A researcher named Al Louie did research and found that very small amounts of melatonin, 1 to 2 drops of our low-dose melatonin, 1 drop equals 0.1 milligram. You can't buy 0.1 milligram in the grocery store. And it turns out that using a tiny, tiny bit is sometimes all we need. And I've written a lot of articles about that. But back to the understanding of, are we seasonal breeders again? I'll leave you with this one note, but please watch the podcast with Paula Witt, mind-boggling research that she did, and get acquainted with this molecule melatonin because it's a powerful circadian reset agent. It's a powerful protective against chronic imbalances that can take us out as we get older, for sure. But they did a study with birth control, and they gave melatonin as a birth control agent. This was like back in the 1980s. They were looking for something because the studies show that historically in the wintertime you can't get pregnant. Women stop menstruating. That the testosterone levels dramatically decline. There's no reproduction taking place in the winter in the mammal animal world, right? So they did a study with birth control, and giving melatonin as a birth control agent was 80% effective, which is of course not good enough for birth control. But when you think about giving melatonin, which depends on 100% darkness. You can't create an environment in our world anymore where it's 100% dark, right? You can't do that. So for melatonin to be, take a melatonin pill before you go to bed after you've been watching TV and the news, I mean, you've lost 6 hours of melatonin that you should have had. And then even the ambient light that comes through your windows and stuff never lets you produce the full dose of melatonin that we really need to get these really kind of historic traditional benefits that melatonin seems to deliver for us in link or in connection with those circadian cycles. So for it to be 80% effective by popping a pill after watching the news or whatever, that's pretty impressive. Clearly not good enough to be a birth control agent, but clearly it was effective of having a powerful impact on reproductive function. So this is just a fun discussion, food for thought about, are we seasonal breeders? Were we ever seasonal breeders? I'm sure you all have lots of things to say about it, lots of arguments one way or another. Let's just throw it on the table. Go to my article, read all the research, look at the studies, read the article, leave a comment, let us know what you think. We'd love to hear what you think. I know it's going to stir some things up a little bit, but it's just an interesting discussion to have. We do have Nobel Prize winning science now that says that we are grossly disconnected from these circadian rhythms, and we need to get it back. I'm not suggesting we should become seasonal breeders again. I think that ship sailed, but I am suggesting that these rhythms exist in ways that we never understood, and it's good dinner table conversation at the very least. All right, thanks for listening. I'm Dr. John Douillard.